A very unusual heat wave continues, at least in terms of how we're getting the heat. It is also bringing a chance of thunderstorms today. This is going to be an update on my video last night. And let's get started with the National Weather Service watches and warnings. There is a heat advisory up until 11 p.m. for both sides of the Willamette Valley, north of the Polk County and Benton County line on the west side, and then on the east side, it is anywhere north of Lane County and east of the Willamette by extension. This does extend all the way to the Puget Sound to the north and into the Columbia Basin to the east. There's also an air quality alert up for a significant chunk of the eastern Willamette Valley and then in the Cascade foothills as well, on top of a red flag warning out east. There is some concern that some of these thunderstorms could spark some more fires, especially in this red flag warning area or this white area to the west. But the odds of dry thunderstorms, in my opinion, have gone down compared to yesterday, which is really good news. First off, I do want to touch on the quote unquote overperformance on Tuesday, where pretty much every major Portland station hit 100 degrees. Portland, Hillsborough, Vancouver, and not shown here, Troutdale, and Aurora all hit 100. Salem also hit 100, and then for the ones that decided to be a little different, McMinnville was the hot spot of the state with a 101, Corvallis at 98, Kelso at 97, and Eugene, the quote-unquote cool spot in the valley, at 96, at least in terms of the official observing sites. The coast was anywhere from the upper 50s in the case of Newport to the mid 70s in the case of Astoria. Then a satellite view of what's going to be happening today. So this is a former tropical storm, or Elida. It is no longer has any tropical characteristics. It's just to show you where this moisture is coming from. And this is going to continue moving to our north. And as it does so, it is going to bring that tropical moisture towards Oregon and Washington. And it's going to time during the warmest part of the day. The timeline has accelerated, and that is shifting the thunderstorm risk from Thursday morning, like I was previously thinking, now to Wednesday afternoon. Also on here is all the lightning strikes. That's all the colors on here. And there was a few cells that occurred in Oregon in this general area, but otherwise there wasn't a lot of pre-storm thunderstorms. Moving on to my forecast notes before I jump over into the weather models. The main changes that I mentioned, I'm changing the risk for dry thunderstorm to be lower. The percent of precipitation is now equivalent to that of thunderstorm. I do not expect any of these storms to get severe. And I am not expecting a massive marine push. There is still going to be one after the thunderstorms roll through, but it'll just bring temps to near average on Thursday versus what we experienced last week. And that brought temperatures down to some of the coldest levels we've seen for the latter half of July in about 15 years. Convection will both be surface-based and elevated. I do lean towards primarily an elevated convection, though some high-resolution models do support the surface-based, which is why I'm wording it as such. Speaking of models, let's jump over there. So first up on here is going to be the European models, convective available potential energy. This is the most unstable parcel. I believe with the Euro model, this is a little bit higher. So this is elevated Cape. And this is at 8 p.m. tonight. And it's showing in Cape values of anywhere from about 700 to 1300 joules per kilogram. There's even a spot here right about Hillsborough where it's 1400. That does not guarantee you will see a thunderstorm. It just means if a cell decides to develop and move over, there is ample energy for a thunderstorm. I'm going to go a little bit more detail on the high resolution model. If I move you up to the Puget Sound and advance this overnight into the morning, the Puget Sound does not get above 500 joules per kilogram with the exception of Olympia until the afternoon hours, where that will be the Puget Sound's main threat. Going into the HRRR model and sneak peek for what I'm about to show, let me rewind this to the afternoon hours. This is noon. Does not look like there is a lot anywhere in the states of Oregon or Washington until you get off the coast. Now let's start moving this. 2 p.m. Okay, some still starting to fire over the Cascades. 3 p.m. There are some stells starting to fire over the Coast Range just west of Corvallis, and one trying to pop up north of Eugene if you're taking this at face value. And then if I move this into the evening hours, there's cells do become a little bit more prolific across the Willamette Valley. I do think that this is a little aggressive in terms of how many cells form, but it does show that there is a general threat of thunderstorms. It does look like if you take this model face value, there will be two lines, and generally it'll move from south to north with either a slight tilt west, maybe a slight tilt to the east. Because the moisture is originating in the tropics, I am less concerned about marine push overriding the thunderstorms and just getting good old rain from this. Not all of this rain will reach the ground for the record. As we move into the overnight hours at 9 p.m., the last of the cells really fire up, and that is primarily north of Salem. And then the overnight hours could see a cell. I think the chance is 10% at the highest. The action moves towards the Seattle area the next day as stells fire up Thursday morning before petering out later on in the morning with a possible second wave in the afternoon hours. In terms of the convective available potential energy for the HRRR model, it is showing a little bit lower than the Euro, but it is higher resolution as the caveat. This is pre-East cells firing, showing in Cape of up to about 700 for the major locations. And if you really want to cherry pick, I can pick out a 13 to 1400 joules per kilogram location. That generally stays is that way throughout the main cycle until we get to post sunset periods where Cape starts to taper off. Until a little bit of a resurgence Thursday morning, but it's looking less likely there's cells firing than before. In the Puget Sound area for their threat on Thursday, a Cape is very similar to the Euro model. In terms of what do I mean by surface-based Cape? That's the most unstable Cape. This is the surface-based Cape. I'm going to rewind this to the same time period at around noon Wednesday. Not a lot of surface-based Cape, which is instability that goes almost all the way to the surface or all the way to the surface. Now, 3 p.m., we're getting some high numbers here. So in the case of McMinnville, that most unstable Cape was surface-based, but in the Southern Valley, it's already elevated. As we go into the evening and overnight hours, most of the surface-based Cape is in the northern half of the Willamette Valley up to about Kelso Longview, and it peters out quickly after about 8 o'clock. This model does show it stick around in the urban areas a little bit more. I suspect it's picking up the urban heat island. I do personally doubt surface-based Cape will stick around for that long. I think it will be primarily elevated if any storms stay on from that point on. And then to show how humid it's going to be, this is this morning at 4 a.m. Same model just for consistency here. Dew points are going to be in the low to mid 60s, minus a brief respite during the early to mid afternoons before the cells get firing. And then once those roll through, the humidity will shoot up probably back to the mid 60s. So it is going to be pretty humid by Pacific Northwest standards. And that humidity does not drop until we go into the overnight 8 hours, and not by a lot. I'll show one more model here, and this is the UW model showing pretty much the same thing. So this is 1 p.m. This is a 4 kilometer resolution. It does not have smoothing, so it's just grid cells essentially. It is showing cells really start to fire around 3 p.m. deeper in the Willamette Valley and going up into the Portland area anywhere between about 4 and 8 o'clock, with a secondary wave at 9 to 11. No cells happen overnight except for maybe a passing drizzle. This model is suggesting there could be some cells from Portland north on Thursday, but that threat is primarily a Seattle-based event, especially in the morning hours. But it is not showing an afternoon threat, unlike the HRRR model. In terms of smoke, this is the active fire map. Anything in red is the current boundaries. The darker red is the level 3 evacuation zones. Most of them are east of the Cascades, with the exception of one fire in Polk County. And with the flow being from south to north, I'm not anticipating significant smoke risk here at the surface. I want to share the Storm Prediction Center's thoughts too. They are issuing a marginal risk for severe thunderstorms for primarily the Cascades and Central Oregon. That marginal risk does not extend into the Willamette Valley. This is a primarily wind-driven threat, as there is currently no risk for hail or tornadoes, according to the Storm Prediction Center. This does not change my personal forecast of saying I don't anticipate severe storms in the valley. But if you are in the Cascades, watch out a little bit more. So that was me showing you primarily one model with a touch on two other models. When I take together most model information, this is what I come up with my timeline in addition to pattern recognition. I do anticipate in general about a 30% chance of seeing thunderstorms in any given location, though I will say last week I did forecast a 30% chance of thunderstorms, and a majority of people saw them. So there is some overperformance potential with this. High temperatures in the South Valley will be in the low to mid 90s. Eugene, I'm thinking will be closer to 90. Corvallis 93. Salem probably about 95. Temperatures will also crash a little bit earlier than the North Valley, and storms will primarily be between about 3 and 7 for Corvallis or so in terms of closest to our blocks. By 9, I think it'll be mainly dry. I can't 100% rule out a thunderstorm during the overnight hours, but I think it is pretty unlikely. Low temperatures will be in the low 60s out there. For Portland, generally about 90 minutes later than Corvallis in terms of when these storms start firing. I have 5 p.m. as my first 2-hour block with the thunderstorm graphic. High temperatures, I am still anticipating right around 99 degrees for the high temperature, and it tapering off into the mid 60s as we go during the overnight hours. I do have a correction to make about last night's video. I said that my forecast low temperature of 69 degrees this morning was a daily record, or would be a daily record low temperature. That is incorrect. I forgot that a day in 2006 hit 74 degrees, which is July's all-time record or low temperature, tied with a day in 1941, I believe. Moving on to the 7-day forecast for the South Valley. This is the only day that I anticipate any weather action. Otherwise, it's business as usual for summer, with temperatures near or even slightly below average, and AM clouds, PM sun generally through most of this. Portland, generally a titch or two warmer to start before getting back closer to the South Valley temperatures, with it being business as usual as well. That is going to be it for this video. If you do see yourself out in a thunderstorm tomorrow, please stay safe out there and do not be outside. A vehicle is your safest place if you don't have a building to get into. Otherwise, stay safe out there and take care.